Hey guys, so it's Andre from High Performance Academy. Welcome along to this week's webinar. Today we're going to be covering just an introductory look at the megasquirt MS3 Pro ECU that we've got fitted to our Mazda MX-5 here. Taz, our customer service specialist, has been kind enough to donate one of his own cars for the purposes of this demonstration, and also our MS3 Pro course development, which is to come. Before we get into that though, just a few things I wanted to touch on that have been happening around HPA over the last couple of weeks, and one of these is some updates on our Subaru STi development car. So head across to my laptop screen. We've got the car on the hoist at the moment, and Brandon and Alan actually literally finished up working on this just before we went live with this webinar. So it's just had a turbo swap, a little bit of maintenance there, nothing too crazy, but the exciting part is that we've currently got this running on the Haltech Elite ECU via an adapter harness. Those of you who have been watching us regularly will have seen me talk about the content on that already. And again, on my laptop screen here, we've got a brand new adapter harness that Brandon has just whipped up over the last couple of weeks to fit up our ECU Master EMU Black. So pretty excited to get that particular ECU up and running on the Subaru STi. That's going to allow us to produce some course material on the ECU Master product. Since we have been promoting that product, we've had quite a few people asking us for some more webinar content and some worked example course material. So that's exactly what we're planning to do there. And for those of you who are wondering about the interface with this ECU and even the Haltech Elite, I will mention that we are kind of cheating a little bit here, because what we've got is a Japanese domestic market version 11 Subaru STi. The Haltech Elite in particular, we're using an adapter harness from Haltech, but this is for the Australian domestic market 2.5 litre STi. Doesn't have variable cam control on the inlet and exhaust, only on the inlet for the Australian model. JDM 2 litre with quad variable cam control, and there's also some differences in the CAN bus communication. So the system we've got up and running, for those of you who have got JDM versions, don't think that this is a plug and play solution for you. Unfortunately, it won't function the CAN bus side of things. So we've got a few problems going on there that we're quite happy with for our development, but for example, the ABS and traction control won't function on that particular system. So perfectly fine for our development on the dyno, but not quite so good if you want to take it around a racetrack or even drive it around the streets. But exactly the same situation is going to be happening with the ECU Master. We're not going to be able to replicate that factory CAN bus, and actually, because we're really asking a little bit much from the EMU Black, we are also out of outputs on that particular ECU, which means that we are only going to be using the variable cam control on the inlet side of things. So a little bit of a disappointment there, but there's no disrespect to the ECU. We're simply really filled it up with inputs and outputs there. Still, it's going to be the perfect platform for us to develop that course material. So that'll be coming probably over the next couple of months. We've still got our plate reasonably full here at HPA Labs with everything that is going on. And on that front, the next thing I wanted to talk about is our remote practice dyno. And we've got some pretty exciting happenings going on with that. For those who aren't familiar with our remote practice dyno, this is a facility that we've got. It is one of a kind, first in the world. We've got a 20-foot container that is sitting out in the courtyard behind me, and it has an engine dyno. It's a mainline 1,000 horsepower eddy current engine dyno sitting in there, along with a control room at the other end of the dyno. And via the wonders of the internet, it allows our students or members from all around the world to access that dyno via TeamViewer and essentially tune the engine exactly as if they were sitting here in Queenstown at our facility. And Alan, our dyno tutor, runs a series of lessons on that particular engine. Essentially what we do is we replicate the structure of our basic courses, our understanding EFI course, fundamentals, EFI tuning fundamentals, I should say. Probably should know the name of our own courses. EFI tuning fundamentals course, then our practical standalone tuning course. So it's a really good accompaniment for those courses to actually reinforce the theory and the practical aspects of those lessons. And the advantage is that our students come out the other end with some first-hand experience actually running an engine on a real dyno. Now, the engine we were running on that particular dyno was a Toyota 1ZZ FE engine, 1.8 litre 4-cylinder with variable cam control on the inlet cam, drive-by-wire throttle. Not a very exciting engine, I'll be the first to admit. I think on a really good day, if the wind was blowing in the right direction, we would see around about 95 or 96 kilowatts on the engine dyno. So definitely not going to blow anyone's hair back. What we have found or heard repeatedly is requests, particularly around LS tuning. And while we're really strong advocates of tuning is tuning, and everything that you learn on a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder engine is still applicable to an LS2, even a 1000 horsepower 2JZ, basically anything. The way the engine responds to fuel and ignition timing doesn't change no matter how many cylinders you've got, whether the engine's naturally aspirated, forced induction, whether it's making 50 horsepower or 5000. But we do understand that people do want to get some experience on the engines that they're more personally interested in. So we've bitten the bullet, and again on my laptop screen you will see we have got a shiny example of a GM LS2 6-litre V8 sitting on our engine dyno. There are still a few final aspects to go along with setting this up, and hopefully we will be back up and running in the not too distant future and able to offer hands-on tuning lessons on the LS2. I'm actually cheating a little bit, because for those who are absolutely eagle-eyed and know the LS engines inside and out, this actually is an L76 engine, I think it is. It's the active fuel management engine out of the Australian domestic market, Holden Commodore. Essentially what this allows it to do is via hydraulic lifters is shut off 4 cylinders. We're not really too interested in that, because we're interested in the performance side of things, so we're not using that on our dyno. It'll be essentially just like any other 6-litre LS2 from your perspective. Now initially we are running this on the Haltech Elite 2500 ECU, so this allows you to get familiar with tuning an LS V8 on an aftermarket standalone. Just because you're not using a Haltech, again all of the lessons that you'll learn there will still be applicable. The other exciting aspect is in the not too distant future we will also be refitting a factory engine control module onto the LS, and this will allow you to get some experience reflashing using the HP Tuners platform. So we know we've had a lot of people asking for that, and we're really excited to offer that. So if you are interested, keep watching this space, and over the next couple of months we will have that finalized and up and running. Now, for those of you who have been following our FD RX7 project, had some really big developments on that car while we were overseas at Goodwood Festival of Speed. Being located here in Queenstown can be a little bit tricky for us to get some of the fabrication work done that we require. Particularly, we're really fussy, so getting someone to do the work at a level that we're happy with has been quite challenging. And we did talk probably about 9 months ago now on our Facebook page. We were asking for recommendations on what turbo kits people liked, what turbo kits people would like to see on the car, and at the time we got a lot of information suggesting we go with the turbo kit, which we did. I'll talk about that in a second. But at the same time, Lars and James from Vinny Fab in Christchurch, was around about 7 hours up the road from us here in Christchurch, reached out and said that they'd be interested in getting involved with the project. Now, at the time, we weren't really looking at the fabrication side of things, so we sort of parked that idea, but as we got further along with the project, we got to a point where we did need some fabrication work, and again, Lars and James did reach out. So we got to chatting to the guys, and they sounded like they were the perfect match for this particular project. Particularly the examples of the other work that we'd seen from them really stood out. We're really impressed, and they do tend to be specialists in the FD RX7 as well, which certainly doesn't hurt. So I just wanted to show you some photos of what was done to the car while Lars and James had hold of it. So we already had our Borg Warner EFR 8474 turbocharger fitted. You can see that hiding down here on the right hand side of the engine bay. This is the full turbo kit, and I have talked about this previously, but just to give you a quick recap. So this sits on a investment cast stainless steel exhaust manifold, and anyone who knows turbocharged rotaries knows that heat in the exhaust side of the turbo system is a real big problem, particularly with reliability around fabricated exhaust manifolds. So the investment cast stainless steel manifold does give a reliability advantage there. The other advantage is because with the investment casting process they've got a lot of control over the shape of the runners, etc. This allows the runners to actually be tapered from the quite large exhaust port on the 13B down to the entrance to the twin scroll housing for the EFR 2474 T4 flange. That also is home to a pair of 40mm TurboSmart external wastegates. Again, just reiterating what we've talked about a few months ago when I was really looking at this kit up close and personal. One of the really nice features there is the way the flow into the wastegates has been prioritized. This is a real big problem again with rotaries. They create a lot of exhaust gas flow, and I see it time and time again where a turbo kit's put onto a rotary and it really struggles to get good stable boost control. So this will give us nice rock solid boost control from as low as about 5 or 6 psi. So that's the turbo kit there, but we needed all of the rest of the fabrication around it, and one of the first things we went with, we actually got hold of a front mount intercooler kit. I didn't really like the idea of going with the front mount kit because it required cutting the front bumper of the FD-RX-7, and we've got a really tidy, pristine Series 7 RX-7. From the outside it looks 100% stock, and we really wanted to keep it that way. We're trying to build something that's essentially a bit of a sleeper. So cutting the front bumper wasn't something I was really super excited about, and also you're going to end up with this big front mount that's really clearly visible. So what we wanted to do was go with a V-mount configuration, and there are kits available from the likes of G-Ready. Lars and James on the other hand have their own custom built kit, which is what we've got here. So we can see that we've got their intercooler here. Underneath they've made their own radiator. You can just see it peeking out under there. So V-mount configuration, we've got good airflow through both the intercooler as well as the radiator. One of the keys with a V-mount configuration, if you really want the best flow out of it, is of course evacuating airflow out of the engine bay. That's something that we haven't dealt with as of yet. So that kit is all nicely mounted up, everything's nice and secure. The other aspect that we can see here is that they have made new intercooler plumbing up to the G-Ready elbow that comes off the factory throttle body, and if I've got another couple of photos here, yep, there we go. So we've also decided to go with the plasma clamps. So these are Wiggins style clamshell clamp. Basically means that there is essentially no chance that any of those intercooler connections are going to come loose. Nothing more frustrating than an intercooler, a silicon intercooler joiner popping off. I've had that happen on a really good pass down the drag strip in a customer's drag car. Was probably on the verge of running a PB for that car at about the 1,000-foot mark. Hit a pop and the intercooler hose blew off. So not really something you want in the heat of a competition, so these make sure that that's not going to happen. Now there is a downside with these clamps though, in that they don't provide a huge amount of movement, so that is a little bit more limited than the likes of a silicon joiner. So to combat that, it is important, if you are going with mounts like this, to really think about the amount of movement that is necessary. These engines can rock around a lot more under torque than what most people would think. It's actually quite an eye-opener to even watch the engine move around on the dyno when it's under high amounts of load. So what we've actually done is gone for a heavy duty engine mount, which replaces the factory rubber mounts with a heavy duty urethane. This is going to reduce that movement, but it doesn't completely eliminate it, because those rubber mounts are there for a reason. You'd be quite surprised when you solid mount an engine just how much noise, vibration and harshness does get transferred into the chassis, but also it puts a lot more vibration into components, which over time can end up with component failure. So that's just a consideration there if you are looking at something like the plasma mount clamp. They're a great clamp for added reliability. Doesn't hurt that they look great too, but you do need to keep that in mind. Now, I'll just move back a slide there. The other aspect here, which we were really keen on and the guys came through with really well, was the intake system. Particularly with the mainstream V-mount kits, the likes of the G-Ready kit, it's quite difficult to get a good cold air supply straight into the turbocharger. Most people we see end up mounting the air filter in the engine bay, and that's not necessarily ideal, particularly at low speed. You're not getting a lot of airflow through the engine bay, so of course you end up with heat-soaked air being drawn into the turbocharger. Heat is the enemy of power. The hotter that air is, the less air density we've got, the less oxygen is contained for a given volume of air, so of course the less power we can make. Now hot air also has another couple of downsides in that it does promote the likelihood of detonation if we're not adequately compensating for that. So ultimately it's not what we want. If we can get cold air into the engine, we're going to make more power. Our engine is also going to be safer. So that's what we can see here. We've got the air filter tucked in front of the intercooler and of the radiator. So you can just see that from the front of the car, but it's a dark color, so it's not particularly obvious. And James has done an amazing job there with the pie cut intake pipe, allowing him to get the tight radiuses needed to get that 4-inch intake down into the front of the car, exactly where it needs to be. So of course that also required the compressor cover to be removed from the turbocharger. It's got plasma man clamps on both the compressor inlet as well as the compressor outlet. While we're at it as well, not a great photo that I've just snapped, but it probably shows the sort of gist of things. So we've got our IGN1A ignition coils there, which are mounted underneath the inlet manifold. Trying to keep everything nice and neat and tidy here, and we got the team at Vinny Fab just to make up a flat mounting plate that bolts to the top of the rotor housings there to mount those coils. Now, we posted up on Instagram about this mounting a while ago, and we had a person comment that this was the worst possible place to put the coils because they were going to suffer from heat soak, and basically we've made a tragic error. And while everyone's free to their opinion, obviously we did look at alternatives such as mounting the coils up on the chassis rail. There are kits available that mount them tucked up to the corner of the engine bay, but unfortunately because we're a right-hand drive model, that'll work fine on left-hand drive, but we've actually got the ABS pump unit sitting right there, so we couldn't mount them there. I'm of the opinion that particularly with all of the factory gear removed from this engine, we should have pretty good airflow around the inlet manifold, and let's not forget this is essentially the exact same place that Mazda chose to mount the factory coil, so I'm pretty confident that we're not going to have too many issues there. The other thing I wanted to show you here is, because we love data here at HPA, we really want to validate everything that we're doing to this car and make sure that it's working exactly as we'd expect. So what we did is got the team at Vinny Fab to add a couple of weld bosses to each side of the intercooler core. Now these are nice and subtle because they're actually on the underside of the core, so you can't see them from the engine bay. And what we're going to be doing there is mounting a pressure sensor pre and post intercooler, as well as an intake air temp sensor, or just an air temp sensor, let's call it, pre and post intercooler. So that's all going to be data logged into our Adaptronic ECU. It's going to just give us some information around the efficiency, effectiveness of that intercooler. We're just going to have a better idea of exactly what the intercooler is doing and how it's performing, which brings me to another point that I just wanted to mention here. I think the intercooler core is one of those products that is often overlooked. People just don't give too much thought to the choice of intercooler cores, particularly we've seen as the advent of cheap Chinese intercooler cores has flooded the market. Over the 10 or 15 years that I ran my shop, we saw some really cheap cores come in, and people were just selecting these without giving too much thought. Now on one hand it is great, because if you compare some of those Chinese cores to the likes of the name brand Japanese tuning house replacement cores, the price is maybe a third or even a quarter of what the Japanese tuning shops were charging. Great saving, but not much point saving money if the product isn't doing the job. And one thing that I found that you need to be really careful with is the internal finning inside some of these intercooler cores. Now I haven't got a really good example of a good one and a bad one, but let's just show you what I'm talking about. We'll head across to my laptop screen. It's always a good idea when you're buying a intercooler core just to have a look through the end tanks at the fins inside the core itself. So that's what we've got here. It's not the greatest photo, but it hopefully gives you a bit of an idea. So what we can see here is we've got some internal fins, which is important because that surface area provides the ability to get heat transfer from the hot charge air into the intercooler itself, where it can then be dissipated out to the ambient air on the outside of the intercooler. Now this is not a great example. It's got some fins in there, but they're relatively low density, so this will work relatively well. What I found over the last few years that I was running my old workshop is that we started seeing some intercooler cores come out of China. They obviously found a way to cut down on manufacturing costs, and literally if you looked through the end of the intercooler, there was no internal fins at all. Now on the outside looked like any other intercooler, so you really had to get pretty picky to figure this out. But where this came to a head was we had a Subaru STi on our dyno. It was a pretty well modified car, should have been around about 400 wheel horsepower, had a aftermarket turbo, ECU, etc. And the car, the engine just wasn't producing power at all. It was down around about 50 to 60 wheel horsepower on where it should have been. And the other telltale was that the intake air temperatures were through the roof. We were seeing around about 65 to 80 degrees C at the end of a run. So we ended up inspecting everything, found that the intercooler was one of these cores with absolutely no internal finning. Because it was just a generic 600 by 300 76mm or 3-inch intercooler, we swapped it with one that we had on the shelf which did have internal fins. Straight away picked up about 50 wheel horsepower, brought the air temps down to the low 30s, which is about what we'd expect. So long story short there, if you are in the market for an intercooler, please understand that not all intercoolers are created equal. Pays to understand what you're buying, and it only takes a second to have a look through the end tank and just see what's actually inside your intercooler. Alright, bit of a long-winded discussion there, but hopefully it was worthwhile. We have, as we always do, just released a brand new video, so we'll head across to my laptop screen there. This was one of my favourite tech tours. We got the opportunity to get up close and personal with a car that I'm a huge fan of, which is Ken Block's Escort Cosworth, Ford Escort Cosworth, the well-known Cosy. So this is the version 2 build after, unfortunately, his original died a horrible fiery death after he crashed it in a rally. So this is a tech tour basically letting you know what makes that car tick. It's the classic Escort Cosworth shape, but in typical Ken Block style. He's gone above and beyond and essentially modernised the entire technical package of the car. We find out what's inside the engine, talk about the electronics package, and in particular the transmission. So if you're interested in Escort Cosworths or you're a Ken Block fan, head across to our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe while you're there and have a look at that video. Give us a thumbs up as well if you enjoy it, and if you've got any questions you can ask those in the comments. Now, I didn't think to grab the display before I jumped into our Mazda MX-5, but just a reminder that our ECU Master giveaway is currently still running. So this is for an ECU Master ADU7 dash logger, display dash logger. Great giveaway, particularly if you are looking for a driver display and a logging unit. If you're interested in motorsport in particular, this is the ideal accompaniment to any competition car, particularly for circuit racing, and do some pretty neat features such as track mapping and lap timing of a GPS beacon. It's got onboard logging. You can make it communicate with just about any aftermarket ECU available via its 2 onboard CAN buses. Also has a nice feature that it will data log to a USB stick, so it means that you can quickly swap out a USB stick in the pits rather than being stuck there downloading data out of the dash. Now, we are including our suite of tuning courses with our ADU7 dash, so you will get our EFI tuning fundamentals, our practical standalone tuning course. You'll also get membership to our private members only online community. You also getting our understanding air fuel ratio course. So I'll get the team to drop a link in the comments that you can follow if you want to get your name in the draw there. And if you follow that link, you'll also find that there are a few other little tasks that you can complete in order to get yourself a few more entries in the draw. So I would urge you to do that. I do think that that is closing reasonably soon. If you want to learn a little bit more about the ADU7 dash as well, we will be updating our Instagram story pretty shortly, hopefully actually after this webinar, with a little bit more information so you get to find out exactly what that dash is all about. Alright, thanks for watching our little pre-show here. Give me a few moments and we'll get started with our webinar.